Open ground versus open ground. One of the subtleties of ASL that I think deserves a little more attention, both from a full ASL point of view and a starter kit point of view. There are two aspects to open ground. There's one that is the terrain feature, and the other is the open ground concept as a game mechanic. As a terrain feature, it's pretty simple. Open ground is any hex devoid of other printed terrain features, which would affect fire or line of sight into that hex. That applies to both full ASL and starter kit. For example, I-5 is open ground, I-7, G7, H4 with a road, etc. They are completely devoid of terrain or hindrances that would affect line of sight. Now, the other part of the definition of open ground is A10.531. And I quote, open ground, for purposes of route determination, dash, concealment, gain and loss, and interdiction, an open ground hex is any hex in which the particular enemy units could apply during a hypothetical defensive first fire opportunity, the -1 first fire moving in the open die roll modifier. And for starter kit players, that is at the very end of section 3.6. So that brings up some very interesting things that again apply to route determination, concealment, and interdiction. From the point of view of game mechanics, when is a hex an actual open ground hex? And I'll run through some examples, not exhaustive examples, to show you when some hexes are considered open ground or not open ground and how that might affect route, concealment, and or interdiction. By definition, F4 is a terrain open ground hex. But if this British concealed British unit assault moves into that hex and claims wall advantage, that is not open ground and they can retain concealment. It's not considered an open ground hex per A10.531 because at the moment they claim wall advantage, that negates first fire moving in the open. For starter kit players, there is no wall advantage, so you can ignore this example, I guess. Let's assume this hill has no orchards on it. Again, this concealed British squad can assault move to D3 and maintain concealment, even though D3, without the orchard being present, by terrain is an open ground hex. By game mechanics, it is not an open ground hex because it gains a +1 height advantage for any fire or line of sight going through the crest line, thus negating first fire movement in the open. Now let's continue with this thought. Again, no orchards. Let's assume this British unit was broken on that hill hex in the line of sight of this German unit. Would they have to route? The answer is technically no, because they are not in an open ground hex. Because, again, the height advantage would negate a theoretical -1 first fire movement in the open in that hex. So they are technically not in open ground, even though there is no orchard there. We're assuming it's not there. Technically, they are not in open ground for route determination. Let's assume this broken British unit is in this open ground road hex by terrain definition in the line of sight and under DM in the line of sight of this German unit. They are not required to route per the definition because they are not open ground, because in that hex, due to this hindrance, the -1 first fire movement in the open would not apply. So technically that British broken unit would not be required to route. And obviously things like smoke, hindrances like smoke, can negate the first fire moving in the open. So this British unit could assault move into this by terrain open ground hex and maintain concealment from this German unit. How about this example here? If I assault move this concealed British unit from G6 to G5, would they lose concealment? In this case, yes, they would, because the line of sight of the German squad goes right down the road into the orchard hex, and the British unit was using the road to move along. So in this case, even if they assault moved, they would lose concealment. So that's just a few examples of what it means to be an open ground hex from a terrain point of view and an open ground hex from a game mechanics point of view with respect to route determination, concealment, gain and loss, interdiction, and dash. I didn't cover dash. So you can see there's an important distinction between those two things. And the one you should really be focusing on is the game mechanic version of the definition of open ground and how you can use that to your advantage. So that's it for today's Friday tactical tip. I'll see you next time, whenever that gets done.